Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm John Buhler, staff writer, fansided.com. I'm joined today by a man who knows that love is blind, especially when you split a bottle of wine and have a summer salad while watching Chocolat or whatever Johnny Depp's in, or maybe, I don't know, just watching TV with your significant other. Um, hey, Cody Williams, content director, Shallow House, Cal, how are you?
Dude, Chocolate, great movie. Absolutely love to see it. It is wonderful. Doing good, man. It is a Monday morning for sure. There's no doubt about that. How you doing, man?
Monday, Monday.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm halfway through an abbreviated Bueller short week. I'm going to be taking some PTO here at the end of the week because I'm shot, but I'm still going to be on the show Thursday, and then I'll be there maybe in more interesting spirits after Texas A&M LSU for 3 yards and a cloud of punt to cap off week what is it, week 9, I think at that point.
Week
Yeah,
nine, man. We're
9.
cruising through this season.
Yeah, North Carolina's got to play and Georgia doesn't. So I mean, at least maybe one of us will win.
No, but no. 0-1 for the week for the podcast, guaranteed.
I know you are playing FSU, and we'll talk about these two coaches here probably a little bit later. But we're going to start here with some first and 15 from Ward Manual's manual. Yes. Any lingering thoughts about the AP Top 25 poll? I feel like it's getting better. I feel like they've it's like water's found its
Mhm.
level a little bit. Again, I do try to pick a bone with the AP Top 25. It's one of our most popular posts of the week. Three teams I'm too high on, three teams I'm too low on. But if I look at the top 10, there's really just there's a few things that stand out. Like Texas is better than the fifth best team in the country, and I get it that Miami's 7-0 and number six, but I don't see it. Like I would take Clemson over them. I would take LSU, maybe Tennessee. Feel it's a push probably with Iowa State.
Yeah, I mean, I think my main takeaway was what you started with, which is like anything I have against this AP poll at this point is kind of nitpicky, more so than it is like actual problems that I would have. Um, in the top five, like I agree with you, Texas, like their resume is better than Ohio State's. Like I understand the Georgia game wasn't pretty, but like the Michigan and Oklahoma wins are still better than anything Ohio State has on the resume to this point. So like same record, I think there's a real argument to have Texas at 4 over Ohio State. I would argue potentially that Penn State should still be ahead of Georgia.
Yeah,
Like I understand Penn State doesn't have the resume, but they also have a 0 in the loss column. So like that does mean something. I think that, but again, like that's nitpicky. Like I understand, like Georgia is probably the better team. So like if you feel that way, then go ahead and rank them ahead of them. Like I don't mind that. On Miami, I believe it was Chip Patterson of CBS Sports, not Bud Elliott this time, but
Chip.
he he posited that Miami is this year's Washington from last year.
Okay.
Which now that I think about that, that's a really good comparison because I think the big thing that makes me worry about Miami's ceiling this year is their defense. Like their defense can't stop anybody, so they're playing a lot of shootouts and a lot of close games. But here's the thing: when you have Cam Ward in this offense, like you can win a lot of shootouts and a lot of close games because he's going to be able to do heroic S time and time again and get you out of it, which we've seen already in the past 3 games for Miami. So like Miami is hard to know what to do with in the same way that Washington was hard to know what to do with last year.
I like that. Chip has the Chip Patterson. We do work with the Chip Patterson. His name's Ian Levy.
That's right, 100%.
They come out there with gyms every so often, but I think that's a really good comparison. I mean, Miami, even if you and I may not feel like they're the best team in the ACC, I feel like they're going to get in just with their
Yeah,
schedule and what they've done up to this point. Like Cam Ward may be the favorite to win the Heisman this week because Ashton didn't play, but we
yeah.
kind of anticipate he'll probably get to New York. I just feel like he's been outside of maybe Gabriel's had a little bit better highs, but like Ward's been probably the most consistent quarterback in the P4. When you bring up the comparison to Washington, that sounds really cool, but then that also means that they're the version of the 22 TCU Horned Frogs and the
Mhm.
21 Cincinnati Bearcats, who eventually got smoked by a much better team in the playoff, which I think that might be on the horizon there for the Canes, unfortunately. But right now, it's all about you.
So his comparison for 2022 TCU, he kept it going. And I actually like this one as well, is Indiana, which we love Indiana. We love what they're doing. And it kind of, Sonny Dykes, Garrett Riley, that coaching staff for 2022 TCU, they really, masked a lot of deficiencies along the way to get to the national championship game, which I think is what we're seeing with Indiana, because like the talent level isn't at the same level as Ohio State, as Georgia, as Texas. We know that, but like they still look damn good. They still look like a team that could potentially beat Ohio State. But when you get to the playoff, I do worry, like if Indiana were to get there, what that would look like. So I like that comparison as well. But yeah, you're right. Like we don't know what's going to happen with Miami, and I do still tend to lean toward A, Clemson winning the ACC, and B, Miami not having a deep playoff run.
Yeah, this past week I'm like I kept like pounding the table like Clemson's got to be higher. I'm like, well, you moved them up to 9, so like I'm not gonna like be barking up a tree about that. Like that seems fair. You bring up Indiana. I feel that they're way too low at like
Yeah.
13. Like I hate to do this because like BYU's having a great season too, but like we could maybe feel a similar way. Maybe help me try to explain this. Like, why do I feel more hyped about Indiana than BYU? Is it because I was higher on Indiana to start the season and I'm being validated for that? Or like maybe just because like they've been in the Big Ten longer? I don't really know what it is because like talent wise, probably comparable. Saggetti hit the portal pretty hard. Obviously, BYU recruits on a national level, gets good players with people from the West Coast and LDS faith, but like I don't know why I feel that Indiana just like I feel like I want them in more than BYU, even though it may end up being the latter.
So I think maybe there is some preseason bias in there, but I also think it's just what this season has looked like. You look at BYU and what they've done to get to 7-0 to this point. You look at the SMU game, 18 to 15. That was a rock fight that they, clawed out. You look at they went to on the road to Baylor, which apparently, on the road at Baylor is not the easiest game in the world. Ask, Joe McGuire and Texas Tech about it, but like they won that game by one score, 6 points, 34 to 28. And that was a close game. Like that was not a, Baylor got a garbage time touchdown. That was a game that was a little bit back and forth. Then, you almost just lose to Oklahoma State. On the flip side of that, you look at Indiana. Indiana hadn't anyone close to them. They've been beating the piss at everybody. So like I think it's just like what the eye test shows you, and that like Indiana has been a dominant force against lesser competition. Yes, the strength of schedule hasn't been there, but they haven't even been like scared at all. Even against Nebraska, like they just pounded them into submission. Whereas BYU has found themselves in a lot of hairy situations, and I think when you marry that with the perception that we have of the Big 12, where this is a conference that just seems like it's built on a house of cards right now in terms of what the champion is going to look like. I think that's kind of where you get that perception difference where it's like, yeah, what Indiana has done looks a little more impressive just because like they haven't been scared at all this entire season.
That brings up a great point. I think it's just how they're winning is really been the big difference here. This is not to pile on BYU because maybe they're just the latest team that checks this box, but like there's teams that are like in the top 15 or the top 16 that we'll debate with our playoff fields here in a second. Where like as soon as they lose, like I can't wait to drop you. Like
Yeah.
there's always about two or three at any given time where like I don't buy into it. Conversely, there's always like two or three teams on the outside looking in. It's like, man, I can't wait for someone to fall out so I can put A&M up here who's playing pretty well. It's
Yeah.
it's kind of it kind of feels like BYU is checking that box. Maybe Miami is doing that a little bit too. Alabama was doing that. I mean, obviously LSU Ole Miss was doing that for a while. Tennessee a little bit, but like, you have teams that have been down like, okay, Iowa State's playing pretty good. Okay, what do we give them their love? Clemson's playing good now. Indiana, Texas A&M, Notre Dame. It just seems like we're kind of at that cross section with the Cougars a little bit.
No, we definitely are. And I think like, yeah, that's a really good point. Like the AP poll to me, and even at this point in the season, like you said, it's starting to level out a little bit in terms of, us having major problems. But at the end of the day, like it is still a reactionary poll. Like Georgia vaulting up to number 2 is a reactionary move.
Right.
And so like you react to what you see, and what you see is, and like I think when I have problems with the AP poll, it's with something like Indiana, because if I'm reacting to what I see, Indiana should be ranked ahead of Notre Dame. Indiana should be ranked ahead of BYU and Iowa State. Like based on what I've seen, Indiana is a better football team and has been a more dominant football team than those three right there that they are currently ranked behind. So like when you take that into consideration, like, yeah, it is reactionary and not always just purely resume based, where because BYU probably has a better resume than what Indiana has, but like there's so much reactionary going on that like I feel like sometimes we forget to marry the resume with that.
Absolutely. I'm like looking at this, like Alabama went down 8 spots. I mean, maybe that's merited, but like Tennessee going up 4, it's a little bit reactionary.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I've got two other thoughts before maybe we move on. I don't know if you got anything else, but both of mine are the SEC very briefly towards the bottom. Mizzou shouldn't be ranked. Mizzou's 21. It's wasting everyone's time. Let's allow Washington State or UNLV or Duke or Syracuse to get in. Mizzou's fraudulent. Mizzou's going to lose to Alabama this week. Like maybe
Are they?
not.
Are they?
I don't know. I don't know. They both, that is an elimination game. Like that's the definitive one, like it
Yes.
was with Michigan and Illinois this past week. But it's like
Agreed.
I'm just done with them. I'm okay. I thought Brady Cook, that was awesome. That's a game that like will be in like Mizzou lore for a long time. Very SEC win. I'm proud of him for that. But at this point, like they just be taking a spot from somebody else, like potentially a Vanderbilt, who's ranked for the first time during the regular season since 2008, baby. Anchor
Let's
down.
go. We love to see it. Shouts to Diego Pavia getting him back in the top 25. My only other thought, I would have moved Illinois up a little bit higher. Like probably to I think like 18. They're at 20 right now, but I probably would have moved them ahead of Ole Miss, ahead of Pitt, just because I think Illinois' resume is a lot better there, and the eye test tells me that they're just a better football team than Pitt or Ole Miss at this point. I would have a hard time putting them ahead of Boise State just because of what Boise State has looked like, but I think they should have been a little bit higher, especially with how I know it was only 21-7, but they dominated Michigan. Like Michigan didn't have a pulse in that entire game.
That team, that team might make the playoff. I mean, they've got less than a 10% chance with FPI of getting it. At that point, it's like it's really unlikely. So that's kind of my benchmark at this point. Maybe we change that there. But again, like it'll be more and more teams less than that because it'll go to like
Yeah.
Georgia will be like 99-7. Ohio State will be like 99-7 at some point.
Yeah.
But like it's if Illinois holds serve versus Oregon and wins the rest of their games, they got a shot. But like they really need Ohio State to falter. And I think if Ohio State loses to Penn State, they may not make it.
That's interesting. I kind of like that. I kind of that would be interesting to see what would happen because like on one hand, yes, it's two losses, but on the other hand, it is like you're probably losing at that point to what, like two of the top six teams in the country. So like those are your only two losses. I do think that would be valued into it a little bit.
It's like at the start of the year, maybe I'll just say finish this before we kind of tie into this too. I thought you want to get more on about Vanderbilt. Also, I'm glowing with the sun. This is great today, but the sun's amazing. I am one with the
Did you
sun.
mention Vanderbilt in the top 25 and the sun shines upon you?
It's like something from like Ocarina of Time. Oh ho ho ho.
Yes,
About to,
absolutely.
let's go slaughter some Ganondorf, man. Let's do it, brother. But
That's right.
we said at the start of the year, or you said this that maybe it was from Bud Elliott, maybe it was from your own brain. It's one of those same at this point, your mind melding, just whatever this
You're not
is.
wrong. You're not wrong.
Um, yeah, Cody Buhler Williams, that's what we're talking about. Anyway, like with Ohio State, you're like, I don't think they've showed anything. They've only got 3 games that they actually have to flex. That would be Oregon, that would be Ohio State, and that would be Michigan. They don't have to flex versus Michigan. Like, and then they
No.
still, but then again, that maybe they need to for ego and vanity purposes because they've owned their ass for 3 years or since COVID. Um, but like Indiana's kind of replaced that too. And you've already didn't win your first game when you flexed, you brain farted. Penn State
Mhm.
hasn't lost yet, neither has Indiana. So you gotta like there's a pathway in there where like if they lose one of those 2 games, it's not looking good.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Like it could, there is a world where it gets hairy. I mean, I think the one difference with Ohio State for me is like, yes, they pissed down their leg a little bit at the end of that Oregon game, but at the same time, like that wasn't a bad showing. You know what I mean? They went on the road to Autzen. They lost by a point. Like it's not like I don't think Ohio State no-showed that game. Like, you can talk about Texas and what they just did against Georgia. That was a little bit of a no-show. Like they didn't show up and meet the challenge. Whereas Ohio State definitely did. They just lost the challenge, which, is going to happen. It's college football. You're talking about 18 to 23-year-olds. Like it's going to happen. So like I'm not ready to write Ohio State off just yet. I probably am ready to pick Penn State over them next week, but like I'm not I still think Ohio State is going to get the benefit of the doubt enough to still get into the playoff.
So Ohio State's got Nebraska and Big Noon. Do you remember who Penn State plays off the top of
Penn
your
State
head?
is at Wisconsin.
Okay, another Miss Wisconsin's 5-2. I'll talk about that. I'll probably talk about them a little bit later, but like I'm not so sure about Wisconsin, but maybe I'm wrong there a little bit too. But you know, only four teams are probably going to make the playoffs. You kidding me out of the Big Ten this year? Yes. Let's go on to the one that's going to take a long time. We'll try to be brief, impossible. We'll give our 12 team fields and our first four out. Um, let's just kind of rattle off our first four and like our AQs just pretty quickly. Maybe there's something to discuss. If not, I feel like it's pretty consistent. You go first, brother.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be the same for both of us. I have Oregon at one, Georgia at two, Clemson at three, BYU at four, and
Okay.
Boise State as the G5 automatic qualifier. I what I saw from Iowa State, I think BYU might be the only surprise in there based on what we've already talked about. But what I saw from Iowa State against UCF, they lucked into that win. Like they almost got beat by a UCF team that I just don't think is that good. I One of the things I've been trying to reconcile mentally with Iowa State is that I think this team is good. I think Matt Campbell is a phenomenal coach, and I think that they have a decent amount of talent on that roster that they've developed. But at the end of the day, I do think that ceiling is limited. And when that ceiling is limited the way it is, like if you catch a team's best game, which I think they did against UCF, you're gonna find yourself in the trouble spot. And I think that'll probably happen at least once or twice before the season's over with Iowa State.
They have a pretty challenging schedule, I believe. BYU has a few tough road games. Again, they got to go to Orlando too, but also I've got some thoughts about Gus Malzahn later that may intrigue you. But I'm pretty much right there with you. I've got Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Clemson 3. I have Iowa State at 4, and Boise State is my 12. It's you are right though. There is a finite ceiling with what Iowa State can do offensively. Rocco Becht has to play well, and if he doesn't play well, then I think Carson Hansen has to take over because it's really they don't really have the explosiveness outside the numbers. If you play like that against one of the top six teams in the Big 12, you're gonna lose. Like if you play like that
Yeah.
versus K-State or BYU, you'll lose.
No, 100%. And I mentioned it on Saturday night. Like, you also have teams like Colorado who only has one Big
Right.
12 loss, who has a cakewalk of a schedule to the end of the Big 12. So, like, while these teams are potentially beating each other up, there are other teams that have a very advantageous spot to kind of just, usurp them, for lack of a better term.
For sure. And I think that's just like the Boise State. I feel like that's just like pretty standard right here. It'd be a shame if Ashton Genty's not in the playoff. And I feel like Oregon and Georgia is pretty obvious. And I think again we've been pretty much in lockstep that we think Clemson's better than Miami. I don't really think
Yeah.
that there's too much to pull from those top three or 12.
No, and Boise has a big game this week. I believe it's either Thursday or Friday. I can't remember which one, but they're going to Vegas. They play UNLV. The Boise UNLV game is this week. It's a weeknight game. And that'll tell us a lot about whether or not Boise is as much of a lock for this G5 spot as we think they are. Because, like, Army and Navy, great stories. I have enjoyed watching Bryson Daly for Army. Have enjoyed watching, I believe it's Horvats for Navy. Like, they're fun teams. This is really good versions of what these teams should look like every year. But they both have Notre Dame on the schedule. Notre Dame is like I said on Saturday, like I'm probably setting myself up for an I'm an idiot at some point, but like Notre Dame is going to beat both of these
Yeah.
teams. Like they just are. They have the talent on defense to be able to just overwhelm Navy and Army in a way that few teams that they played to this point have had the ability to. So like I just see Army and Navy falling back a little bit. And outside of that, like the G5 contenders have just kind of not done themselves any favor outside of Boise. So like if Boise can get through UNLV, I don't see a team in the Mountain West that can really hang with them. And it seems like it might just be kind of a cruise control to the playoff.
Yeah, this is probably the most significant G5 game of the year because if UNLV wins, they may go to 12 because I'm right there
Hmm.
with you. For as much fun as Army and Navy are, Notre Dame's going to smoke them, and we could be idiots at that point. Mac doesn't have a contender. Liberty is 5-0, but they lost the app game. Kusa's
Hmm.
down, and they got to play WKU, who I think is going to beat them.
Yeah.
And then, what Sunbelt? I think JMU is interesting as well. Washington State's only got one loss to Boise, but they're not in a conference. So
Yeah.
like, it's we really need Ashton Genty to run for like 250 yards and four touchdowns. Just to,
I mean, a pretty good bet at this point. So,
I almost kind of feel like if it's not gonna be Boise, I kind of want it to be Army though. I feel like that would be
Mhm.
just because I think Bryson Daly might actually be a Heisman contender. I think that's he's kind of putting himself in that situation just right now. Whereas like I feel like Navy is just and they're good, but like I don't feel like they're quite there yet. I mean, although they beat the brakes off of Charlotte, who's not horrible.
Yeah, I know. It looked like Biff wanted to go out there and play some ball himself, quite frankly, in that one. But yeah, no, you're 100% right. Like, I think Army is probably the second most fun possibility for this. Like, I just don't, any of the other teams in the AAC just, they've just looked imperfect. Like, Memphis at times has looked very good, but Memphis at other times, it's just like, they're a high variance team is kind of what they come off to me. Whereas an Army, like you know what you're gonna get, but no one's had any success stopping that to this point.
Yeah, I just kind of feel Navy's a lesser version of Army right now.
hmm
So like it's like when Georgia was at its peak, Michigan was like a lesser version of that, and at its peak, Utah was a lesser version of Michigan. So it's essentially the Georgia you have at home. I'll definitely talk about Utah later. So let's move down 5 through 11. So who do you have at five?
At five, I have Penn State, and I will say I put a decent amount of projection into this 12 team playoff. Now that we're 8 weeks into the season, I feel a little more comfortable doing that. I think Penn State is going to beat Ohio State. I think that Penn State is a better team than Ohio State because I think they're better coached. And that's not a necessarily a James Franklin thing. It's a Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen thing. And I think that Penn State, again, coming off of that win over USC, it might not look that impressive, especially after USC loses another game. But at the same time, like I said that week or the week after, that is a game that Penn State loses pretty much every time over the past couple of years. The fact that they were able to claw back, win that game when they were playing poorly in the first half, that tells me a lot about the DNA and makeup of this team. So I'm a big believer in the Nittany Lions. I would not be surprised if they actually ended up as one of the top four seeds and won the Big Ten. Like that would not shock me at this point.
I do have Penn State coming up here shortly. I have Ohio State at five. I
Okay.
feel, and I did this like right after we recorded, like on Saturday, very late Saturday night, early Sunday morning for me. And I just kind of give like an initial reaction. I try to revamp it because like I got to write something at 9 a.m. based off of this pretty quickly on no sleep. That's just, work hard, play hard, I guess. Just work hard,
Just
win,
work hard.
play.
Yeah.
Just
We don't
work
get to
hard.
play.
No, go back in that mind, brother. But
That's right.
I just kind of feel that like it's just so far in James Franklin's head. And it's going to be like there's so much talent. There's going to be some terrible coaching and everything in this game. But like, it's a hammer versus nail rivalry. Every time I pick the nail to win when Georgia plays Alabama, I end up getting a piece of metal hit in my face. So like at this point, like against my better judgment, I'm probably going to take Ohio State here, but I have Penn State at six.
Okay. And so I have Ohio State in the playoff field to be very clear. Like I don't think they missed the playoff. But my counterpoint to that would be if I am taking one negative thing away from Ohio State, Oregon, Ohio State's defense, which I've been touting all season long as like the reason that they are a national championship contender, it's not even that they gave up 32 points to Oregon. It's that their defensive front was unable to get pressure against an offensive line that has not performed at a high level this year. You know whose offensive line has performed at a high level this year? James Franklin's in Penn State. If they're able to mitigate Ohio State's defense, like I think that head-to-head matchup, it just ends up like really teetering in favor of the Nittany Lions. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but like I I have some very categorical concerns about Ohio State that stem from Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and a lot of these players. Like, yes, the talent on paper is phenomenal. I don't see that talent performing up to its potential always right now.
I mean, Chip Kelly's got that forehead. I guess he must have gotten hit in the head with a hammer. That thing was, I don't know what's going on with him. He's aging like milk, dude.
He's turning into Megamind.
You remember that guy who's like, yeah, I keep putting like paper mache in my head, his giant bald head, and wait until one day for somebody to say something.
Yes.
I just keep going to Best Buy. Oh, hey, John Lynch, what are you doing, brother?
Oh my
Yeah, I don't think I can't believe like Mahomes has two more picks than touchdowns, and they're 6-0. I don't think anybody in the NFL is any good.
No, there's not. Well, the Lions might be. I think the Lions might be
Yeah,
pretty damn good.
Lions might be good. Yeah, Lions might be good. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Bucks Ravens. Maybe one of them will be good too.
Maybe one of those teams is good. We'll see. We'll see for sure. So my six is Texas. Again, I think that Texas got hit in the mouth, like you said, and didn't know how to respond. I think the response comes the second half of the season. I think that this team is way too talented and has shown a ceiling that's way too high to not believe in them based on one game. Like I think that this team is still very damn good. I think Georgia is Georgia, and losing to Georgia, there's no shame in that. And like that's kind of where I come down on that.
Yeah, I have Texas at 7, and I
Okay.
feel like the loss was pretty damning. It was like there's a thing on the sidelines where they showed a picture of Manning and Ewers, and just like, oh, the moment just looked a little too
Yeah,
big. Whereas I think like Ohio State, like they lost by 1 point on the road. You lost by 15 points at home. Your team threw a bunch of garbage on the field. Everybody in the SEC just hates Texas. It's pretty clear. Uh, I think when Texas plays USC, it's just a hateful. I think people just hate them for just
100%.
but it's I think there was adjustments that have been made and everything like that, but I'm kind of a little nervous for when they go to A&M in a couple of weeks. I feel like that game's going to be really good. Yes, A&M ducked them, very Lincoln Riley of them for 15 years, but like at the same time, it was kind of revealing. I kind of felt like it was in their head with the offensive line. If they go up against a really good defensive line, it's going to look like Tennessee going up against NC State. I don't care how much experience you have at all.
So I got to tell you, I don't believe in A&M, man. I just can't get there. I cannot. I think Mike Elko's a good head coach. It to me, it comes down to the offense. I think that the defensive line is good. I don't think it's great. I don't think this defense is great in any capacity because I think just, I mean, point blank, you lost too much for you to be great. Like that's just kind of where I come down. And I think that, you know, when we go back to week one and we look at the Notre Dame game, that's hard for me to get out of my memory because Notre Dame was able to handle them. And if Notre Dame can handle them and, you know, they weren't a juggernaut offensively by any stretch of the imagination, but they were still able to move the ball pretty decently. I have a hard time imagining that teams like Texas, teams like LSU won't be able to do the same because I don't think they played an offense that same caliber since then. And so like I'm gonna need to see it for Texas A&M from Texas A&M before I believe in them. Like I can tell you right now, they're not even in my first four out. Like I think that they have a precipitous drop off because I think they lose 2 to 3 more games.
It would all come down to what happens there at prime time versus LSU. I guess my thing with A&M, why I'm high on them is I think they're well coached. I think that like
Yeah.
there's not as much talent as before. Maybe it's addition by subtraction. People who went there for the wrong reasons, 7 figures mostly. Mike Elko knows how to coach. Colin Klein, you're tough. We know you're tough. You know how to run the ball. I always blank on the A&M's defensive coordinator, who you're a big fan of. What's his name?
Dude, I'm totally my brain is not working right now. Hold on.
You mentioned him before. It's like
I know, and my brain is just not computing anything right now. Uh, Jay Bateman. Yeah, my boy.
Jay Bateman. Maybe that was the wrong name. It was another guy. It was like the Tyler guy or whatever it is, but never mind.
Are you thinking of Arkansas's DC, Travis
Yeah,
Williams,
there we go. Cousin Travis. There you
cousin
go.
Travis. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
T-Rab. Yeah, never mind. A&M. I made you look something up. I'm really sorry. I'm an idiot. So who do you,
It's all good, brother.
so you've got Penn State at 5 and Texas at 6. Who do you have at 7?
So this kind of tells you where I'm leaning on the LSU Texas A&M game. I have LSU at 7.
Oh
I
snap.
think I don't think LSU loses another game this season, quite frankly. I think that what I've seen from this defense, the way they were able to shut down Taylor Green in Arkansas, the way they were able to tighten up in the second half against Ole Miss and, you know, spurn that comeback on, this LSU defense is no longer like a problem. I don't know if it's good necessarily, but it's not an issue. And with how potent this offense is, that's a very dangerous combination. You don't need an elite defense. You just need a defense that doesn't like cut your Achilles basically. Like that's really what you need if you're LSU. And I think they're getting that right now. Garrett Nussmeier has not just lived up to what I thought he could be this season. I think he's even better. Like even the one of the things that I've said about Garrett Nussmeier is he's not a mobile quarterback, and he's not. Let's be clear.
No,
I've not changed my tune on that. But one thing he's done a really good job of and gotten better of, especially since the USC loss to start the season, is evading pressure. Like he stays in the pocket. He's not going to, break contain, then, take off, but he's not getting sacked. He didn't take a single sack against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss was in his grill for much of that game. And the same was against Arkansas. Like Arkansas has a good defensive front. Again, mentioned my cousin Travis. Like cousin Travis was able to get pressure on Garrett Nussmeier, and he again did not take a sack. So I think Garrett Nussmeier is becoming like a high caliber quarterback before our eyes. And in a conference where I think it's pretty fair to say that in the SEC, like we're kind of struggling for the high caliber guys to like live up to that at this point. Like we have Garrett Nussmeier and Diego Pavia, and then outside of that, I don't know like who's living up to that because like we talked about Carson Beck, he didn't play particularly well against Texas. Like we talked about Quinn Ewers, obviously didn't play particularly well against Georgia. Jalen Milroe has kind of just taken a step back for the past few weeks. Like the quarterback play in the SEC is not what we thought it was going to be this year, and
no.
Garrett Nussmeier is kind of filling that void at the top right now.
I think that's fair. I've got LSU coming up a little bit later. They always start slow under Brian Kelly. They go on a big run and then they lose. Uh, LSU might make it to Atlanta. I feel like them, Georgia, Texas, maybe A&M. I don't know about Tennessee. Like that's kind of how I'm feeling. We'll probably get to Atlanta, but LSU still hasn't lost a conference game yet. And you're right though. If they beat Alabama and they beat A&M, they're in a really good spot to potentially do that. I don't know how the tiebreaker goes. Again, the USA loss is looking worse and worse by the day. I'll talk about them in a little bit.
But it is also getting further and further away. Like there is
That is
something to
true.
be said for losing your first game of the season and that being your only loss. Like Clemson is dealing with that right now as well. Like the further we get away from that Georgia loss, the better we're going to feel about Clemson. And I feel the same way about LSU in that USC game.
So yeah, you've got LSU at 7
Hmm.
and okay, 8. I've got Miami at 8. I just feel like I can't knock them down too far. Maybe they are this year's Washington. I kind of feel like maybe could have them like 8, 9, 10 range at that point. I just kind of feel like more confidence week to week. Like they could lose to Duke, they could lose to Georgia Tech, and I'll knock them down to probably like 13 to 16, somewhere in that range. But right now, like they've been like on top in the ACC. I think they've been
Yeah.
on top of their conference longer than anybody this year. I think there comes with a certain level of pressure because there's been variance in the SEC, variance in the Big 12, and obviously variance in the Big 10, depending on how you view Oregon. At that point, I don't think Oregon was at the top. Miami's kind of been at the top of ACC the whole year, so I'll give them credit with that. But there's Mario.
There is the Mario of it all. I do have Miami in the playoff field, but not yet. 8, I have Ohio State. I think I've already unpacked enough there. Like I think they only lose 2 games this season, and I think that's Penn State and obviously the Oregon loss that they've already taken. And I don't know if that gets them to Indianapolis, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like if you're 10-2 with your 2 losses being to 2 top 5 teams, like you're gonna get in the playoff. Like that's just
Yeah,
kind of the simple truth of it.
yeah, you'll be somewhere in that 7 to 10 range. You'll probably host like a Tennessee. Maybe you'll go to if you're like a 10, maybe you'll go to Miami or something or
Yeah.
SMU, something like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. But it's hard for me to envision Ohio State not in the playoff because like have they done anything particularly impressive on their resume? No. Have they done anything to make me think less of them? Also no. So like that's kind of where we're at with them.
Yes. So I've got Miami at 9. I've got Notre Dame. I kind of feel like
Same.
they're moving their way up there. Northern Illinois loss was bad, but obviously the MAC had like a moment and now it's gone like Kansas. The MAC is dust in
Yes.
the wind.
Indeed. Indeed it is. No, I have Notre Dame at 9 as well. So I'm right there with you.
10, I have LSU.
Okay. 10 is where I have Miami. And I think
Okay.
Miami, like, I think that the thing with Washington last year is that they got lucky in some spots. And Miami has already gotten lucky in some spots, but I I I think betting on that luck not running out at some point is a fool's errand. Like I think that Washington is the exception to that rule as opposed to what I think we're going to see from Miami. Like Miami's schedule is advantageous, don't get me wrong. Like they don't have like a game that truly scares you left on the schedule, but I still think that if you can almost lose to Cal, if you can almost lose to Virginia Tech, if you can get pushed by Louisville in the way that they did, like allow Louisville to score 45 points, you're gonna slip up at some point. I still
Yeah,
think they make it to Charlotte. I still think they're playing for an ACC championship. So they're going to get in the playoff, but I have a hard time seeing them not slip up.
it's coming. It's going to be either to Georgia Tech or Duke. It may be to Syracuse at the end of the season. Like one of those
Yeah.
three teams is going to be able to do it. SMU though, we got to keep figuring out if they're going to potentially crash the party. Like that's another one too. And then obviously what happens on Thursday between Pitt and Syracuse is going to tell us a lot with like who could potentially be there as well. I don't trust Pitt. I don't trust Pitt at all.
No, not at all.
Um, Now let's go to like last team in. Against my better judgment, Fool's Errand, I've got Tennessee in. I don't like having them here.
Okay.
I don't
Uh,
I don't like it. I think that like the defense is good. Nico played pretty good down the stretch in a rivalry game.
mhm.
I also just think that Alabama's just really undisciplined defensively. They let people back in the games. I will say this with Tennessee. If they split between Georgia and Vanderbilt, they're going to get in at like 10-2, probably.
Potentially, I'm not
Maybe
particular.
not. It's close.
I'm not particularly confident that they do split at this point. That's
No.
kind of the thing is like I think that yes, you're right. The defense is very damn good. If Nico was playing well, Tennessee wins that game on Saturday by 3 scores because
Yeah.
Alabama's defense was not locked in and Nico missed a ton of throws. Like the offense just still isn't clicking at the level it needs to right now. And I think the SEC is just too strong in the middle class for that to be the case. Like, yeah, they're not going to lose to UTEP. They're probably not going to lose to Mississippi State. Could Kentucky get them next week?
Early game, but potentially they're well coached defensively. They can
Yeah,
muddy it up. I'm not ruling it
yeah.
out.
And if you muddy it up, like, what's that going to mean for Nico? Like, I don't. I can't get there with Tennessee. I do have them in my first four out, but I do not have them in the field. You know what? I had to do it. At 11, I've got Indiana. And where I'm coming down with this is, let me paint this scenario for you. Let's say Indiana does not upset Ohio State. They lose to Ohio State. But if Ohio State still loses to Penn State and we see either Oregon or Penn State drop one of these games down the stretch, there's a good chance Indiana is in Indianapolis at 11-1 because I don't see another loss on their schedule based on what I've seen from the Hoosiers to this point. If an 11-1 Indiana team goes to Indianapolis, I do not see a world where that team gets left out of the college football playoff. Just point blank and period.
If Indiana gets 11 wins, they're getting in. I feel like it's the
Yeah,
same sort of thing. It's the same sort of predicament with Mizzou. It's like if Mizzou gets to 11 wins, they're going to make it in. It's just like you can't have an 11 win team in the SEC or Big Ten not make it. It's just the way it is.
exactly. Yeah. Those conferences are too well respected and too talented for that to not be the case.
The ACC, it gets interesting. It's like, okay, if Miami's 11-1 and loses, or if SMU's 11-1 and loses, or K-State's
Right.
11-1 and loses, BYU, Iowa State, it's a case by case basis. You're not sure.
No, not at all. But with Indiana, I'm pretty sure. So I'm willing to put them in the playoff. Like I said, there is a bit of projection in here, but like, and let's be clear. I said it on Saturday night. They can beat Ohio State. I'm not going to
Yeah.
predict it. I don't think it's like likely the likeliest outcome, but like, is it like unrealistic? No, it's not. It's absolutely in the cards.
Now I'd say like Indiana's probably got like 25-30% chance of doing it, but that's still sizable and they could do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we got our top 12. I'll rattle off my first four out. You do the same, and then we'll recap and we'll move on with our life. So Indiana's my first team out. I almost wanted to put them in there. Probably should have over Tennessee in retrospect, but like I don't know. I feel like Tennessee's played a little bit tougher competition to this point. Maybe that's what gets them in. I've got A&M at 14. Again, their only losses to Notre Dame. They're still trying to figure it out. Haven't lost a conference game yet. We'll see what happens with LSU on Saturday night. BYU, I have them at 15.
Mm.
Again, like the Oklahoma State game almost was a loss, but like how they do versus, UCF and Arizona State and Utah, who's fallen on hard times. I feel like they may slip up in one of those, but the path for them getting to Arlington's pretty good unless Colorado comes alive. They do have the head-to-head over K-State, and they obviously don't play Iowa State this season. And then I have Alabama at 16, just because like I don't know. I feel like if they beat Mizzou, like they're still alive, barely, but
Yeah.
like they can't lose another game.
Yeah. So I have Tennessee at 13. I have Iowa State at 14. I have Illinois at 15. Because looking at Illinois' schedule, even if they lose to Oregon this week, I still think they're going, like you mentioned earlier, I still think they're going to be on the fringe of this. I don't it's hard for me to see them getting that final push, but like I do think they're going to be in the conversation more so than people realize at this point. And then I have Alabama at 16 as well. Like I do think that they lose to LSU. Like what I mentioned about Garrett Nussmeier, all the throws that Nico was missing on Saturday night, Garrett Nussmeier's not going to miss those throws, and it could get pretty dicey for Alabama's secondary pretty quickly in that game. But I do think they're a better team than Missouri. I do think they should like. I don't want to speak in definitives when it comes to Alabama at this point because I don't
No.
trust them at all, much like Tennessee. So like I just think that they should beat Missouri based on everything I've seen from Missouri. But again, coming back to the idea of okay, this defense has looked undisciplined a little bit, a lot of penalties. Another thing, like that's always a good sign for undisciplined, and Alabama is racking up a lot of penalties right now in defense. And I think that the secondary still hasn't gelled the way that they were hoping for. I like there's still a lot of wide open receivers running down the field. And while I don't think Missouri has been good this year, I do think this coaching staff is capable of getting those guys running wide open. And I think Brady Cook, for being a Jag, basically, is capable of hitting those guys and enough to be able to keep Missouri in that game. So I'm more intrigued by that game than I thought I'd be the more I look at it.
It's the 3:30 kick. That'll be exciting there on ABC. I will say if Alabama wins versus Mizzou if three things happen. Again, they've got talent in the secondary. We know that Sab, we know that Moore, I mean, a friend of the program, Damani Jackson, they're all really talented players. Like they're all going to be like top 100 picks whenever they come
Yeah,
out. But like they can't, they're not all playing great at the exact same time, which is so frustrating.
right. Yeah,
Uh, Gia-
100%.
Giad Campbell is a lot of fun too at linebacker. He's really good.
I
I
mean,
want to see.
it's not a defense devoid of talent. Like
No,
that's not
they
the issue.
no. Jalen Miller needs to take care of the ball, maybe give it to Justin Haynes a little bit more, and then pick your spots with trying to get the ball to Ryan Williams and company because like if the secondary hones in, they're gonna pick Brady Cook off 3 times and win.
No, 100%. Like there is a world where Mizzou gets just pasted again, like they did against Texas A&M. There's absolutely a world where that happens.
I think that's fair. So let's recap and then let's move on. So I'm gonna go my 12 first four out. You do the same and we'll move on. So number one, I have Oregon, two, Georgia, three, Clemson, four, Iowa State, five, Ohio State. Have to enunciate there. That's challenging. Six, Penn State, another state. Texas, the Lone Star State. Miami, not a state school. Notre Dame, I don't know what state they're in. LSU, Louisiana State. Tennessee, volunteer state. Boise State, 12. And my first four out is Indiana, Texas A&M, BYU, and Alabama.
So I have one Oregon, two Georgia, three Clemson, four BYU, five Penn State, six Texas, seven LSU, eight Ohio State, nine Notre Dame, 10 Miami, 11 Indiana, 12 Boise. My first four out are 13 Tennessee, 14 Iowa State, 15 Illinois, and 16 the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Roll Tide. And probably going to roll Tide here a little bit with some Duhast or Duhast here. Yes, this is just because we got some more power playoff stuff on the mind. So this is good. Lucio D'Artolo kind of Castillo kind of put this in my mind with an article I wrote. Duhast, Cody. Will the Power Two, the Big Ten, the SEC, get more than 7 teams into the playoff?
I'm not gonna lie, you this more than probably any Duhas or Duhas we've done, this had me
Yeah.
stumped because it's tough. And to me, it comes down based on how we feel the ACC is going to play out with Clemson and Miami. It comes down to okay, what do you think Miami does? Do you think Miami gets into the playoff, or are you more confident that they slip up both before the ACC championship and in the ACC championship? And what does that mean for them? Kind of like what you mentioned about the conversations that we're going to have about what the ACC's viability as a conference is. And I'm gonna go Duhast 2S. I think that it probably does settle in 17s just because I think Miami has done enough, has built enough resume enough that they can suffer two losses and get in there. I'm not sure that SMU is in the same boat. I think it really does hinge upon Miami solely. Like I think Miami or I think SMU, if they lose another game, they're far enough down in the polls that I just don't see them being able to recover from another loss again. So like I think that whether that's fair or not, we can debate that. Like, I think that's probably unfair. I think SMU might be on the same caliber of these two teams. They're just not being ranked as so. But I do think end of the day, like it's going to be hard to keep Miami out if they even just mostly hold serve from here on out.
It's really tough, and I'm sitting there trying to do this. I was also trying to figure out, is there a way that six SEC teams can get in? Honestly, that almost feels even more likely than this. In a way, like there's so much that has to happen, but I'm right there with you. Do Host two S's because the Big Ten's not going to get more than four teams in. It's probably going to be three.
Yeah.
I just had this feeling that between Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana, and maybe if you want to throw Illinois in there too, like two of those, if you include Illinois, like are gonna it's gonna prove like it's not gonna happen. Like it could be you could have a playoff where it's Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana, or Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State. But I
Yeah.
don't think you're gonna get four in. And then at the SEC, it's like it's four or five. I don't know what the number is. It's probably not six. And then it really comes down to your exact point there. It's Miami and Clemson at SMU. Like I feel like two are gonna get in. We don't know what's going to happen with the Big 12. Maybe two gets in. Notre Dame's going to keep rolling, 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 rolling. And then obviously the group of five's got to get in. So, like, I don't see how eight get in from the SEC and the Big Ten unless the ACC only has one true champion.
So I think like the only way the SEC is able to pull it off, like I'm with you on the Big Ten. Like I think it's a cap at four. And even though I have four in there right now, like it's probably more likely that three get in, but three or four for the Big Ten. But then in the SEC side, for the SEC to get this, like to get this number two, eight or higher, or to get six teams in themselves, we need like a lot of chaos down the stretch. Like I think like just off the top of my head, trying to like blueprint how that would happen. I think you need Tennessee to beat Georgia. I think you need LSU to beat Texas A&M, but then lose to Alabama. And then I think you would need Texas A&M to beat Texas in the finale. And I'm sure there's other results that would need to happen in there, but like that's enough of like taking the elite teams, the teams that we have, in the top six or seven, and pushing them down a peg with teams who are also like kind of on the fringe contenders as well. So like I think you need a lot of chaos for that to happen in the SEC.
And then you have three other potential chaos agents there with the Vanderbilts, with Mizzou, and with Ole Miss, who could throw a
Yes.
wrench into this too. I feel like those three are just they're further behind the rest of them. Whereas it's
Right.
like they could conceivably get in. Arkansas can't with three losses now, but like they could muddy it up in some capacity too. But like you're gonna need like it's almost as if like you need to have two teams who are definitively going to Atlanta, and then
Mhm.
about four where it's like I don't know who's between three and six. I can't tell.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like again, like it's if the season just plays out like chalk, then there's no shot that this happens. Like there's no shot more than seven of these two power two conferences get in there. Power conference teams, excuse me, get into the playoff. Like there's no shot that happens if we don't have more chaos coming. But hey, with what this college football season has looked like, I'm not writing that off completely just yet.
No, like I have seven in my projections at this point. So I think
Same.
yours is yeah. So like we did the math, and it's wild there. And again, it's like we need to have a little bit more a better feel of what like the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the ACC are going to do. I don't see Notre Dame losing unless but if they lose to Army.
If Notre Dame loses to Army, then yes, I might have to go do Haas 1S. But again, don't quite see it happening.
Okay, that was very succinct. Let's move on to something that's probably not going to be as succinct. It's getting hot in here. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Hot seat watch through 8 weeks. We probably each have about five. I kicked mine out. It's like three separate buckets. Like five are in the hot seat, five other who's who might, and keep an eye on these five. So maybe let's just go through our five and then we'll kind of see where we go here. So who's on the hottest seat in college football for you right now, Cody Williams?
So I went deep cut here, and I apologize for doing this to the people, but Trent Dilfer at UAB, brother, he is so cooked. That team is terrible. That team has quit on him. Yeah, Trent Dilfer, you are not long for the Blazers, brother.
I only went power for him. I love that. I've actually interviewed Trent Dilfer, very nice guy, but like, oof. Also, yeah, we had some terminations and movement over the weekend. Mike Houston's out at East Carolina. That was the guy, I believe he was the predecessor at JMU before Kurt Cignetti and Bob
Mhm.
Chesney. So like, and then also Will Hall's out at Southern Miss. Um, Brent Venables fired Oklahoma alum Seth Luttrell, former the North Texas head coach, after 7 games as the OC, OU alum. And then Andy Ludwig resigned as the OC at Utah. I guess working with the Wilson brother would do that to you. But like,
That's what literally what I was sitting there thinking. He's like, if it's not Cam Rising, I don't want it.
no, sir. Talk about Cam Rising here in a little bit. But I guess just like a thought about East Carolina and Southern Miss. Like those are two schools that have like been hurt considerably by realignment. Like if East Carolina is now like in the American, if they were still in CUSA with their rivals and stuff, they wouldn't like they wouldn't have to like be playing second fiddle to like a Memphis or something like that. Great fan base, but like it's brutal. And then Southern Miss, they left all the rivals. Nobody cares. I think it was
Yeah.
like up into 2011, they had like 8 losing seasons ever, and they've just lost a ton in like the last 2 years. Like, I think Southern Miss has been hurt by it more than anybody. It's brutal.
Yeah. No, Southern Miss has been, I mean, and then also like you throw in on Southern Miss, like they haven't been good. Like I believe Will Hall's record at Southern Miss was 14-30. So like, not a good football team, but like they were at least respectable in the past couple of years with Frank Gore Jr. Then you lose Frank Gore Jr., who is on an NFL practice squad right now. Actually, I think he did make his NFL debut for the Bills, if I'm not mistaken.
Let's
Regardless,
go.
doesn't totally matter. But like you lose a player of that caliber at Southern Miss, and you like they've had no shot at replacing them. Like it's been a slow, steady talent drain since Will Hall got there, basically.
Yeah, it's like there's effects of realignment beyond what you even see, and
Hmm.
obviously some of those teams that are in the American are just aren't ready for it, and it sucks, but this happens, and then Sun Belt, it's all over the place. But my hottest seat, dude, it's crispy Brent Venables, man.
Yeah.
It's like when you fire Seth Luttrell, again, this is like maybe stop hiring alums and then fire them to be your OC. We did with Josh Heupel. It's like my dad texted me and he was like, could Oklahoma suck any worse?
Yeah. And I don't know if they could, honestly.
Like, I don't know, like it's they had their athletic dictator, Joe Castiglione, who's been in the role longer than a fifth of the time Oklahoma's been a state. Like, why do they spend all that money to get a head coach who's not ready for this? Culturally, Oklahoma fits in the SEC. Texas can be a little more of the wine and cheese crowd. Oklahoma can kind of be like, okay, A&M, it's going to fit pretty good, but like they gave up being a top three program all time to be essentially Florida at their new
Yeah.
conference.
Yeah.
You bench Jackson Arnold, then you burn his red shirt, and you got Michael Hawkins Jr. out there. This team is absolutely dead. Like we're kind of getting back to some John Blake, Howard Schnellenberger nonsense right now.
Yeah. So I have Crispy Brennan too. So that transitions nicely into this list. But like, yeah, man, it's not working. I do like, there's two things that I think about Brent Venables. One, I still trust him as a defensive mind. Like, the 35 that they gave up to South Carolina was not the defense's fault.
Right.
South Carolina scored 21 points, and I think they gained like 26 yards of offense in the first quarter. Like they had a pick six, they had I believe, a 12-yard touchdown drive and a 14-yard touchdown drive off of turnovers. Like that, like I don't care how good of a defensive mind you are, but I do think that like you can't overcome when your offense is just hamstringing you that so
No,
frequently. But I don't think it's Seth Littrell's fault. It is a Brent Venables problem. You're not recruiting at the level you need to win in the SEC at Oklahoma, frankly. Like I don't care where Oklahoma is in conference realignment. Like you're not recruiting at an Oklahoma caliber level. You brought in Jackson Arnold, and maybe he's just not the guy. Maybe he needs more time, but you're not giving him that time because you're putting him in a poor situation with a shallow wide receiver room that is now banged up, so you have no one to throw to, and an offensive line that's dog water. So like I think the biggest problem I have with Brent Venables is I think that what they hired him to be in terms of a defensive mind head coach, someone to prepare them for the SEC, I don't think he's failed in that necessarily. I think he has failed in terms of building a program and building a culture, which when you consider where he came from and you think about the transition of modern college football and what, the issues that Clemson and Dabo Sweeney have had, maybe we shouldn't be that surprised about it.
No. And then you also, I mean, we talked about this before. I mean, yeah, you had to do it. You had to move on from Cale Gundy, but obviously Cale Gundy is so well connected in recruitment, a great quarterback,
Yeah.
mind and everything like that. Like you lose your cachet within the Sooner State and the greater Southwest with Texas. And again, you're getting harpooned like in the recruiting trails. And then you go into a bigger, better conference and you're just exposed. And it's just like, who's going to want to play there? Honestly, I feel that Oklahoma just needs to completely reset it. I don't maybe just drill, baby, drill. Like go get a new AD, go get a new head coach,
Yeah.
get somebody because this is it's almost untenable at this point, and it's untenable at number two with Lincoln Riley. What a effing clown show that guy is.
Yeah, dude, it's I have Lincoln Riley at 3. So again, transitioning nicely. Like it's just what what has Lincoln Riley done well? And I do want to give Lincoln Riley some grace in the fact that I don't think this is entirely a Lincoln Riley problem. It is partially, probably a good part, Lincoln Riley's problem. But at the same time, I do think that they brought Lincoln Riley in to USC to be like the cure all, the immediate fix. Like Lincoln Riley will cure all your problems. And I think that when you look at the Clay Helton era and you look at the what's the word? Like the ills that had befallen USC, self-inflicted ills to be very clear, but like the ills that had befallen that program, it was never going to be a quick fix. And Lincoln Riley's trying to put quick fix band-aids on it, but like this is like something that needs time. This is something that needs like grace to like actually wait it through. I don't think USC is going to give like Lincoln Riley that grace though. I think they're unrealistic about what they have to what needs to be accomplished to get USC back to glory.
It's you hired a glamour coach and a glamour
Hmm.
program, and then you left a glamour conference in the Pac-12. You killed it with the help of Kevin Warren
Yeah.
to go to the Midwest, and you need to get a head coach who knows how to win there. You pay Matt Campbell whatever it is. It doesn't matter what that number is. You pay him you pay him 40 million a year to do it. Like because like but then you also is like, okay, I got to leave Jamie Pollard, but maybe he has a lot of respect for Jen Cohen. But at that point, there's no alignment there. I don't know who else you would potentially go. Buyout doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Like you can find the money somewhere. Like I just feel that like the way that he coaches, unless he can get running backs, it's not going to work with his offense. It puts so much pressure
Yeah.
on his defense, and they're losing these like close one score games on the road versus teams that are athletically, culturally, it's just they're just inferior to them. And it's because your scheme doesn't work. You can't out scheme people in this league. You got to muddy it up. Honestly, go get Brett Bielema. Why don't you hire Brett Bielema, dude?
Yeah. No, 100%. Like it's like
Brixley goes to
dude's just done
Hollywood.
nothing but win. Let's be clear.
Brixley goes to Hollywood.
Dude would pay big money to go see
Uh,
it.
okay. My number three is Hugh Freeze. I don't think Auburn's going to win another game this year.
I mean, it's entirely possible, dude. Like this team is yikes. I will say that, and I mentioned it earlier. I wonder what the point of no return is for Hugh Freeze because, like, despite how bad it's gotten, have you heard like any actual insider like say like Hugh Freeze's seat is hot? Because I don't think I've seen that.
I mean, John Cohen's not going to keep his job if he moves on from him. Like there,
Yeah,
it's like it's going to
exactly.
be like they're going to run him out like they ran out of Alan Green before. And also, why would you left your alma mater at Mississippi State to hire the disgraced head coach at Ole Miss to destroy Auburn? Inside job. Love it, man. Maybe that's what it's all about.
Maybe we just unlocked the real conspiracy theory. But no, like
Uh,
I do think that Hugh Freeze, like I do not have Hugh Freeze in my top five. He probably should be, but like I can't escape the fact that if we're talking about actual hot seats, like I don't think Hugh Freeze is getting fired. Like I just quite I don't even if they go 2-10, I don't even know if that's the breaking point because Hugh Freeze can still sell to the administration. The administration that is like for reasons you just mentioned, inclined to believe whatever Hugh Freeze is trying to sell them because they do not want to fire him. That well, I'm still trying to, pick through the Brian Harsin mess of it all. Like that's what I'm trying to do, and like it's going to take a little bit of time. And maybe, maybe that's actually a good decision from Auburn because I will say, like, I'm of these coaches we're talking about, I'm perhaps most surprised by Hugh Freeze being in this conversation because, like, for all of Hugh Freeze's misdeeds, losing football games has not really been a misdeed that he's been
no.
guilty of before. So, like, I am somewhat inclined to trust his long-term vision if that's what they're going to buy into.
Yeah, so touch on Hugh Freeze here a little bit. So who do you have at four?
At four, I have Ryan Walters at Purdue. I
Okay.
think it's not good, man. Like
No.
this is you had kind of your pop week where you pushed Illinois to the brink, but outside of that, it's been pretty lifeless. Like you barely had a pulse against Oregon. And granted, it is Oregon, but like you didn't have a pulse in West Lafayette where a place we've seen be a house of horrors in the Big Ten traditionally. Like, even if the Purdue doesn't pull off the upset, which they have more frequently than any other team in terms of facing top two teams in West Lafayette in the country, they have the most wins in that scenario. But they've still kept it close in other games as well and put scares into teams. They didn't even do that. Like this team just doesn't seem to have much of anything going for them right now.
I've got Ryan Walters coming up in a little bit. It was very on the borderline of making my top five, but I'm making an adjustment on the fly. Right there with you. I've got Mac Brown at four. I feel that like it's maybe retirement or whatever it is. Like you're on the bye. If you lose to your alma mater at Florida State this weekend, and again, I also considered Mike Norvell. It's like Mac Brown, Mike Norvell, Ryan Walters is all right there. It's just like whoever loses in Tallahassee, it's gonna be really bad. But I'm right there with you with Ryan Walters, though. It's like there's just no pulse. He got that job way too soon. It just shows like how good of a head coach Jeff Brom is. And more importantly, Mike Babinski's not an idiot. Like he had good success
Yeah.
at Georgia Tech. Matt Painter took Purdue to the national championship.
Yeah.
Your football team, the crowd showed up. People were there. They love that football team. It was a cool atmosphere. They couldn't do anything.
Yeah. No, 100%. I have Matt Brown at five. So like I'm right there with like love you, Mac. I appreciate like I think the best way I saw a tweet and I wish I could attribute it to who it was, but it was someone in like my North Carolina fan sphere that that I follow on Twitter. But someone said that all of the good work that Mac Brown had done through like the previous like 4 years to rebuild this program to kind of like pick up the pieces and get it back to a respectable level is currently being undone. And like that's a really tough pill to swallow. Like you were supposed to be the kind of like the stabilizing bridge between every all the crap that came before him and then like whoever the next head coach is, whether that's Jamie Chadwell, whether that's whoever it is that's going to be the next head coach of North Carolina, you were supposed to be the stabilizing bridge and you're not completing the bridge. In fact, you're going and you're taking an axe to the middle of the bridge. Like you're screwing up all the work that you did and like that's there's no coming back from that, quite frankly.
I mean, it's like me trying to adjust that blonde real quick, thinking that's going to affect the sun here, but it was didn't work at all. It's coming further away. I can't reach over there. It's 11 o'clock Eastern, October in Georgia. That's just how the sun. Huron would have moved already, but she
Oh
probably
yeah,
already.
100%.
So yeah, I think we kind of are on the same sort of page. I had like I think 10 other names that are kind of monitoring. So I mentioned Norvell. You've got Sharon Moore and Deshaun Foster. It's like, okay, can you actually do this? Gus Malzahn's lost four in a row. So that's an issue there in Orlando. Troy Taylor, if you didn't beat Stanford, oof.
Yeah,
Or if you didn't beat or
that's
beat Syracuse, excuse me. He's beating
yeah,
Stanford
no,
all the time.
it's fine. Yeah, no, I yeah, he's beating Stanford all the time.
I don't know what Dave Clawson's is. Neil Brown, maybe Ren Baker moves on from him. Dave Aranda, it feels a little more safe than I thought. Mark Stoops, I don't know if you maybe what it may be interesting if he doesn't go to a bowl game. And Billy Napier's got a tough schedule coming up, but like I don't want to fire. I don't want to really want to move on from like Clausen, Brown, Aranda, Stoops, or Napier at this point. I think that they earned that just yet.
No, they definitely have it. And I think, again, shouts to Billy Napier for getting his team to play him off of this list because like it has been Florida's been friskier than I expected them to be. Like I expected this team by this point in the season to be a little bit on quit watch, quite frankly, and they're not. They're playing hard. So shouts to Billy Napier, man.
Billy Napier's been he's been friskier than Bubbles.
That's right.
You weren't ready for that.
No,
No.
it was not.
But I think you might be ready for some 4 for 4. I'm an idiot with the biggest things we've gotten wrong thus far. This is fun because like we're about 2/3 of the way through the regular season, roughly, and we'll be like, okay, things that we made predictions in the offseason to the start, like this has not gone, and I'm an idiot for making that decision. So ACC, where you feel it? I probably know where you're gonna go.
Yeah, I think everyone who's ever listened to this podcast knows that I was quite high on NC State this year. Quite high. I had them in my preseason college football playoff field high. Um, I gotta tell you, I don't see that happening at this point in the season.
No.
Think NC State might have fallen back a little bit. So yeah, NC State, I was a believer in Grayson McCall. I'm still a believer in Dave Doran. Like I still think if you think Dave Doran's a bad coach based on this season, you're blind, quite frankly. But like some jobs even the best coaches can't even make work, and that might be the case this year. Grayson McCall was a lesser version of himself, and then he's been injured the entire year, and that's partially why he's been a lesser version of himself. But the defense took a dramatic step back. This is one of the worst defenses in the Power Four. It's not good in Raleigh right now.
No, sir. I almost thought about them, but I did say, I'm not. I got off the hype train just in time before it crashed.
Yes.
But I stayed and I put on the satin kimono, which is a sheep in wolf's clothing with Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
I swallowed that hook, line, and sinker. This is Texas Tech from last year. It's the same thing. I didn't even really know who Kyron Jones was. Like, oh, he's definitely going to be good, and Virginia Tech has definitely been mediocre.
Hmm.
Um, I also feel like an idiot for, you know, discounting Pat Narduzzi a bunch. He is a good head coach. Pitt had a terrible season. I think it's just like he needs to have a good quarterback. Maybe Phil Dracovic was more washed than we ever realized. You get Eli
Yeah.
Holstein, you're having a good start here. And then I'm an idiot for completely writing off Cade Klubnik. He's talented. He just needs to be coached up. And he's
Yeah.
clearly a Heisman contender at this point.
No, agreed. Absolutely.
Big Ten. Whew.
Okay, so this was the hardest one for me to come up with. And I honestly can't say that I exhausted a lot of oxygen on them, but I think the team I feel the dumbest about is Maryland. I think that I expected this team to kind of crater a little bit because you lose Talia, you lose a lot of talented wide receivers and stuff like that, and I just thought, has Maryland been retaining the talent? Like we know Mike Loxley is a good recruiter, but like Maryland's also lost a lot of talent in the transfer portal as well. I'm like, do they have the talent to sustain the losses that they suffered to, graduation and things like that? Turns out Billy Edwards is pretty damn good, man. Like the
Billy.
USC win doesn't mean a whole lot, but
No.
like I expected Maryland to lose that game running away, and they fought back and they won it. So like I think Maryland is a lot friskier and a lot better than I expected them to be this season.
That's fair. I was trying to figure out what I would do here. It's USC. Like I was
Yeah.
like, I did
I
this
mean, that's
last year.
probably the answer for me as well, if we're being honest. But I don't want to take too many L's.
No, 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 no. I did this last year with your Dallas Cowboys. I'm like, I'm you know what? I'm never all in. I'm going to be all in, and then I got burned, and I was all in on USC, and now I'm getting burned, and I'm never going to be in on USC as long as Lincoln Riley's coaching there. I'm never going to pick him to win another game. I don't care. Like that's going to
What
be a
about the
running
Dallas
bit.
Cowboys when Lincoln Riley's coaching them? Will you be in on them?
Um, I almost said something really inappropriate, but like that's going to be a 5-12 team, dude.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not looking forward to it.
It's driving like this.
Trying to look cool, but in reality, you're like, the duck's the duck's feet beneath the water. That's the other hand right there, just keeping you stable.
Yes, I also feel like an idiot for saying that Jed Fish was a serious candidate for Florida. He's having his own difficulties with Washington.
Mhm.
I don't think Florida can hire him if they move on from Billy Napier. Not that they would. And then I think I was also an idiot for thinking that like the players were going to buy into Sharon Moore bad. Turns out they're just stupid. Go
Uh,
dogs.
I feel quite smart about Michigan because I said the entire offseason, I was like, this team's not good. I promise you. I, I don't see how they're going to win football games. And you know what? We're 7 games from Michigan into the season. I don't see how they're going to win football games against good teams. I really don't.
No, going from Michigan's conference to Iowa State's conference, you bet. Let's go on to the Big 12.
So the one I'm gonna take the L on here is Kansas. I didn't expect Kansas to be this damn bad, man. Like, shouts to them for going and beating Houston this past week, but it's your second win of the season, man. Like, I still think Lance Leipold is a great head coach. We talked about it on Saturday. Like, I think he's a guy who should very seriously consider taking any P4 job that opens that is in a better program and better long-term situation than Kansas is going to be. But man, I did not expect the fall off to be this dramatic. Like, you went from dark horse Big 12 contender to not gonna make a bowl. When that is precipitous, and I didn't think it would be that bad.
No, when Kansas saying point of no return with the Sailors, they'll pay you well. They literally went off the felt us off the edge of the earth here. This is my biggest one that I was so wrong about. Cam Rising, Cam Black Smoke Rising in Utah. I had him going to the Heisman ceremony. The guy can't even play.
The guy can't even
The,
play.
the guy like shatters his pelvis taking a dump. Like you need to like put him out to pasture or cut his hand off. I don't know. Probably a really cool dude, but like me, he's got a LinkedIn profile now. So welcome to the club.
Shouts out to him.
I also feel I was way too high in Arizona. They had a new head
Yeah.
coach. They're changing conferences. They lost a lot of people to Washington. I should have saw that coming. And by basically dunking on BYU, thinking they're going to go 4-8, well, they're 7-0. So I need to shut the freak up.
Hey, never mind. I'm not going to make a joke there.
Maybe they can throw milk and donuts on the field.
That's right. Get a no. Again, we need to get off the topic of BYU because I'm going to say something that I can't. So,
Well, let's go somewhere where it doesn't mean enough, where you can say whatever you want. It's fine. Let's go to the SEC.
so I think the thing I was most wrong about was Nico Iamaleava. And I expected him to be kind of the next big thing, like the quarterback of this young crop that we have to hit the ground running and never look back. And I thought Josh Heupel's offense would allow him to do that, and it's just not been there, man. And I'm not out long term on Nico. I still think that long term he's going to be a good quarterback, but I think he needed more experience and more growth than I realized, and that's shown up time and again. Like this offense is just not it's strange that we're living in a world where we have a much ballyhooed recruit in Nico Iamaleava at the quarterback position, and Tennessee's defense is what is carrying them to being a potential college football playoff contender.
Totally agree right there. I didn't have that down, but that's actually the right answer. That's number one. Um, Mine were okay. Auburn sucks. I thought Auburn was going to be 8-4, pushing for a top 25 spot. No.
Yeah,
I initially had Oklahoma going 6-6. I'm like, no, that's unhappy. They're going 8-4. No, man, they're going like 4-8.
yeah. Oh, for sure.
And then I think we collectively were wrong about the hot seat because I don't think Sam Pittman's on it. Billy
Yeah.
Napier is getting his way off of it, and I don't think Shane Beamer is coaching the best team that might not go to a bowl game. I think he's got South Carolina playing really fired up. So like, yeah, I was completely wrong about that.
I mean, Shane Beamer's out here at midfield, like consoling Brent Venables after he beats the pants off of him. Like that, I did not have that on my bingo card. I can tell you that much.
Would you hire Shane Beamer to be the head coach at Oklahoma?
That's interesting. I don't
Yeah,
hate that at all
no,
because like we've
he
talked
would.
about the South Carolina job. Like I don't think the limitations that South Carolina has are a Shane Beamer problem.
No,
I think South Carolina is competitive in a lot of these games because of Shane Beamer. So like I do think that going to Oklahoma where you're going to have more resources, where you're going to have more avenues to actually succeed, that's interesting. I kind of like that.
I'm all in on that, man. We did Beamer
You might have
versus
unlocked
Sark.
something. I'm here for that.
Yes, and I don't know if I'm going to unlock something here, but we're going to unscrew something. We're going to do a brand new segment to end the show today. Keep it actually a pretty good time, all things considered. I mean, started a little bit late, but we got good time here. We're gonna do this thing for celebrating teams that are going bowling and teams that are not. So for any team that has suffered its seventh loss of the year, we're gonna pour one out. And if they got 6 wins, they're going bowling, 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 bowling. So we obviously have a lot more teams going bowling because we didn't do this on time, but we do have to pour one out for our first team. That's the Kent State Golden Flashes, who are 0-7 on the year.
Yeah. Turns out losing Sean Lewis was not great for the Flashes. Not a great program step. This team's awful, dude. I don't know if I know you probably haven't watched a lot of Kent State because you're not quite as like, you know, when midweek action starts, I'm sure you'll get your view of Kent State and you're gonna be like, holy hell, you know, Cody was right about this. But this team doesn't do anything well, man.
Yeah.
Like they just really don't. They're one of the worst defenses in the country, and they pair that with one of the worst offenses in the country. Like I believe in terms like if you want it stats, like I think they're outside of the top 110 in both offensive and defensive success rate. Not what you want. Not what you
Yeah.
want at all. And like the fact that you're rarely even competitive in the MAC, which I think is a conference that is frankly worse than we thought it was going to be this season. Like that tells me everything you need to know about Kent State. Like this team is just in a very bad spot. It's always been one of the hardest jobs in the country. The fact that Sean Lewis found as much success there as he did is a testament to the kind of coach he is and why, you know, I think we're high long term on what San Diego State is going to look like. But I think that as of right now, Kent State, I don't know where you even go from here because, like, you're a program that is going to be up against it no matter what, based on your resources. You're at a resource disadvantage, even in the MAC. And now, like, with the transfer portal era, if you do have anyone who's talented, they're going to get taken away, like a Devontae Walker or something like that.
Yes, it's like Kent State is like has no confidence. It's like Kenny Burns. How do you that should be an easy way to spell it, you know? Kenni. Shoot.
I.
I they're worse than Akron, and that's all you really need to know.
Yeah, and that's a tough spot to be in.
So we'll pour out some more things for teams that didn't make it probably next week because there's a lot of 6 loss teams. This is the only 7 loss team out there. But there's a lot of teams that have 6 or more wins. So um Cody, do you want to read or make an ass of yourself? Which one would you rather do this morning?
I'm gonna read because I think you've got the necessary energy this morning that I do not have for the making an ass of yourself.
Perfect. So I've listed them in alphabetical order of every team that is 6-0 or better. So Cody, who's going bowling, 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 bowling?
So we have the Army Black Knights at 7-0.
They bowling, 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 bowling.
That's right. And then much to your chagrin, the BYU Cougars.
They're bowling, 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 bowling.
That's right. And even with the loss to Georgia, the Clemson Tigers.
They're bowling, 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 bowling. Dabo sucks, but they're bowling.
That's right. Shouts to our boy Manny Diaz because the Duke Blue Devils, they are.
Bowling, 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 bowling.
That's right. You know, put your chest into this one because Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs are.
They're bowling, 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 bowling. Yes, horns
That's
down forever.
that's right. Coming off the big win against Michigan, Illinois.
They bowling, 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 bowling with Brixley.
That's right. Speaking of, I'm sure Kurt Signetti has someone in his life named Brixley. The Indiana Hoosiers.
They bowling, 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 bowling.
That's right.
Coach
Coach
Sig.
Sig forever, baby. The Iowa State Cyclones.
They bowling, 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 bowling.
That's right.
This is so dumb.
The Kansas State Wildcats.
They bowling, 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 bowling. Yes, no five-layer beef burritos either.
That's right. Honestly, probably the most shocking inclusion on this list. The Louisiana Raging Cajuns.
They bowling, 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 bowling.
Dude, shouts to the Raging Cajuns always. Speaking of Cajuns, the LSU Tigers.
That po' boy is bowling, 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 bowling.
Poland. Boy. The Memphis Tigers.
They bowling, 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 bowling.
Despite their best efforts to try and lose an ACC game, the Miami Hurricanes are.
It's all about the bowling, 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 bowling.
That's right. Despite the fact that they are not any good, the Missouri Tigers are.
They suck, but they bowling, 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 bowling.
They're not any good, man. What is happening? Team that is good, maybe not as good as Army, but the Navy midshipmen.
They bowling, 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 bowling. This is so stupid fun. I'm loving this.
The Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
They bowling, 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 bowling. Also, you lost Northern Illinois. What the hell?
Yeah, like you're still bowling, and you lost to Northern Illinois. So, salute to
Yeah.
Marcus Freeman. The Oregon Ducks, the number one team in the country.
They
Turns out
bowling, 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 bowling. Ah.
that's right. The Penn State Nittany Lions, who might actually be the best team in the Big Ten.
They bowling, 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 bowling.
Do you think Pat Narduzzi has ever heard of Limp Bizkit? Because the Pitt Panthers are.
They bowling, 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 bowling. I think he's Fred Durst's uncle, to be honest with you.
Pro- Good.
But
Can't rule
he
it out.
hate he hates their music.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. The Tennessee Volunteers, another team who might not actually be good.
They bowling, 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 bowling. Forgot about the
That's
SMU Mustangs on there, but like Brett
oh,
Lashley with the shrimp cocktail, they bowling, 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 bowling.
sorry, I did not have the updated list in my notes. That's my apologies. But yes, much like the AP voters, we are forgetting about SMU as well. The Texas Longhorns, despite
They,
losing to Georgia.
they bowling, 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 bowling.
Need you to give me your best yell leader impression because the Texas A&M Aggies.
They bowling, 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 bowling.
That's right. Shouts to our boy Barry Odom always and forever because the UNLV Rebels.
They bowling, 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 bowling. Cards. I don't know. Dice. I aborted that midway through because that looked like something else.
And speaking of something else, we finish up with the Washington State Cougars, a team without a conference, but that doesn't matter.
They bowling, 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 bowling.
That's right.
That was a lot funner than I thought it would
Oh,
be.
absolutely.
I will keep track of this, so I don't have to read them all off again. But that was. Hope my neighbor doesn't come upstairs.
Just, just ask him if he's bowling.
Take a look around. We're recording a podcast.
Obviously.
And I don't want to break stuff, but this was episode 119 of Fall Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow Cody Williams at the Sizzle20. You can follow the show at CFB Fall Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. If you have a phone and you like apples or Apple, go give us a 5-star review there because that really helps the show. We want 5. Honestly, if because we were bowling, give us 6. I mean, like 6-star review if you could. Like
Absolutely.
honestly, I'll tell you what. If you write a 5-star review, and say this is actually a 6-star review in there. We'll talk about you on every show. We'll answer every question. We'll get you a starter jacket. I don't even know what that means, but it's better than a kimono sad kimono.
We'll get you the false start Josh Heupel Letterman's jacket.
I was not ready for that.
Oh God.
God, take a sip of your coffee. wash out your bowl. This is false start.